This is Open Door with Vince Robinson. In-depth conversations with people who are making a difference in the lives of others here and around the world. Culture is at the heart of who you are. Know your culture, find yourself on Open Door with Vince Robinson.
Great dawning, grand rising, Cleveland, and the rest of planet Earth. Welcome to another edition of Open Door with Vince Robinson. My guest this morning has 20 years of experience in community organizing, advocacy, and program leadership development. Her years of experience have been rich and diverse, spanning areas such as women's wellness, food justice and security, collaborative activism through art, youth civic engagement, creative writing, literacy, and more. She's been a lover of words and writing since a child across mediums, including poetry, prose, short stories, songs, and hip-hop. She's currently working on a collection of Afrofuturistic stories and reimaginings of the Black experience throughout time and space. Her name is Aja Barrett. Welcome to Open Door with Vince Robinson. Aja?
Thank you so much. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing quite well. And I will add on to this that in some circles, she is known as Queen's Reign. So let's start with that. How did Queen's Reign come about?
What a good place to start, and such a lovely question. Queen's Reign, and you know, Vince, it's funny because some people think that I spelled it wrong because it's R-A-I-N, and it's not. It's literally Queen's Reign, because Queen's Reign was when I first started my first women's group over 20 years ago. My son was a baby when I did my first women's group, and it was right in my living room when I lived on Kinsman. And that was the name of the group, Queen's Reign. And I just kind of thought about, after the first circle was only supposed to be 2 hours from 6 to 8. The last woman didn't leave my house till like 3 a.m. And it was such a beautiful experience. We laughed, we cried, people shared things. People I had known for 20 years shared things that I had never known about them. Like, it was just such a lovely experience. And when the women left, I thought about the tears that were shed amongst the women there and just the feeling that we created together. And I literally saw, in my mind's eye, it raining softly over the queens of the community. So Queen's Reign, that's how the name was born.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting about that, too, is just the significance of tears. Because it's not just fluid running from your eyes. There are spiritual implications to that happening. So it's deeper than most people realize. And I'm sure there are probably folks who are thinking that it should be REIGN. But I think you were intentional, and it's a beautiful label to have. And I think it also goes along with the fact that, I might be putting your business out there. But if my research is correct, you happen to be Pisces, and it is a water sign.
This is correct. And I don't mind you pulling that out. I am a proud Pisces, and Pisces 100% through and through.
Yes. Okay. So the significance and the beauty of bringing women together to have those conversations against the backdrop of sisters being at each other's throats and backbiting and everything. But I think what happened was you created a safe place for expression, and you had things that you needed to talk about. They had things that they needed to talk about. So you created a wonderful paradigm, and that perhaps is a launching pad for your activism.
It will. And it has. And I just want to backtrack a little bit to the piece you said about the tears, because you're so right about that, and the spiritual connotations, but also just the social and communal connotations to the tears as well, especially a Black woman's tears. Much of my work, whether it's community organizing or whether it's advocacy and work with Black people or Black women or Black children, I realize that society and the world doesn't allow us to feel, so we, in the work that I do, Vince, and it's a very sensitive topic for me because I see it so much, even in my own self and in my family sometimes, but we are not allowed to feel. And I feel like that it just withers and kind of fades in the way in which we interact with ourselves and with each other. And I think that our emotional self is so very deeply connected to our spiritual selves. And it's such a beautiful part of who we are collectively because we feel so deeply. And even if we look at the spiritual, how we can draw from our past and how it lives in our spirits and in our tears and in our experience and who we are. Like when we draw from that and bring it to our present of who we are, I just think it has such a beautiful sparkle and layer to who we are. So that's why emotional wellness is a big piece for me when I'm working with women and just Black people, period.
You know, and I would bookend that by saying how important it is for men to have a space to do the same thing. And I'm not saying that men should get together have crying sessions, but I do think that it's important for us to be able to express emotions and to feel safe in doing so. You know, the common narrative is that, you know, buck up. You know, stiff up the lift, you know, shrug it off, shake it off,
concrete.
You know, and so you have all that stuff building up inside of you. You know, it's ironic that we have this conversation because I was watching a video on social media this morning, and it was a young man and his wife, and he was talking about how the first 5 years of his marriage were difficult. And it wasn't because money was an issue. It wasn't because infidelity was an issue. It was because he didn't feel safe to be vulnerable with his wife.
Oh, wow.
And he had a moment where he was basically asking her the same thing, you know, and he realized in that moment that he needed to be able to talk to his wife. And it was funny, too, because the roles were reversed. Usually it's the lady, it's the woman saying, we need to talk.
Right.
And then when you hear that, it's like, oh, Lord, here we go. You know?
You know what? And see, therein lies the problem, okay?
Right.
But it's beautiful that you bring that up, though, because what do men do? Because we know that when you hold that emotion in, it can cause illness and disease, especially over time. And then not that every Black person is having a quote unquote urban underserved experience, but many of us are, especially in Cleveland, especially Black women in Cleveland. It's like just another layer of disharmony and dis-ease in your experience on top of all these other things that you're up against. So, you know, we're talking about the women, but I do want to ask you, like, what do men do or what should men be able to do? And I'm asking you that because I talk to a lot of the husbands and the boyfriends and the son, like the male loved ones of the women that I work with. And I'm like, man, you know, I wonder what they do for their wellness, their collective wellness. And I've led wellness circles for youth, like male youth, high schoolers and junior high school boys. But I think that would be different than leading men. And I start thinking about it like, I'm a woman. Could I really lead a wellness circle for men? And I've always thought about it, but I never got into it past the high school age.
Well, first of all, I think you could do it. But second of all, I think that there's kind of it's a precarious situation. Because if you are too vulnerable, then your vulnerability gets misinterpreted as weakness.
Is that just for men or anyone?
Well, no. For when a woman perceives a man to be vulnerable, sometimes that translates to weakness. And sometimes within that paradigm, a woman will lose respect for a man because she sees him at that moment in time. And they don't forget it because they're looking at the man, and the man is supposed to be a protector and a provider. And if he's showing me weakness, then he might not be able to protect me. And then you have hypergamy that enters the picture, and then they start looking for someone else, and then the relationship falls apart. So, you know, it's really sad that it's that way, but I do think that it's a beautiful thing. And his wife, coincidentally, fully embraced that idea of him, you know, being able to express himself and being able to express himself to her first. So he don't have to go to his boys and have the conversation that he should be having with his wife. you know.
Right. And I think that when men have those conversations with their friends and their peers versus with their woman, that conversation looks a lot different. And I'm not so sure that it's balanced and that man is really getting um, a full spectrum and a holistic viewpoint of how to navigate your emotions when you're in a relationship. And I want to say, too, we talked about the spirit and the ancestors. In regards to this, Vince, I wonder in our pantheons, like our African gods and goddesses and our mythology and our pantheon, if we have examples of male masculine energy that is holistic when it comes to emotion. Because I really think for Black men, it's unfortunate that to be able to nurture that side of yourself and to be clear about your emotional identity is seen as weakness. If a man is providing and protecting, like you said, in relationship with a woman or a wife, that should only be seen as a strength, right? Because that's fertilizer for the field of activity that we're on. Most women do complain. I can't talk to him. He don't talk to me. He don't feel nothing. Like, you hear that from so many women. So for a man to be able to not have his masculinity threatened because he has a clear emotional identity and perspective of who he is, I think it's unfortunate that that's not seen as a strength.
Mm-hmm. And, too, the tears that benefit a woman also benefit a man.
You got to get that out of there.
Yeah.
You got to, and tears, again, back to the Queen's reign, because in my mind's eye, my creative mind's eye, I saw a soft mist cleansing us from Newt and all of our feminine gods, and from God and the sky and nature, and the circle was like a cleansing. And I feel the same thing for men. Like, it's like a rinsing off of the trauma, of the stress, the pressure, and the connective tissue, the emotional connective tissue to the person who you share your space with in your life and your heart.
Yeah. Just looking back at my life at moments when I was moved to tears, it was my connection with someone from the ancestral realm. I'm recalling one time when I was riding down Martin Luther King Boulevard, and this is shortly after my father's transition. And, I'm one of those people who understands, transition not being the end. It's, the beginning of a new life. And my father suffered from Parkinson's and some other things that really, it so completely eroded the quality of his life. We had to give him permission to leave, and we did, But I was riding down MLK and it just kind of hit me. But what I realized in those moments is that is when I have made that connection with someone on the other side. I see it for what it is. And, it was a moment, now in this present day, I celebrate my father's life. I understand how he lives through me and how I'm doing his work and those who came before him. But, I had tears rolling down my cheeks, And,
Ashe, and thank you for sharing.
Yes. So,
especially the way in which you evolved it, like you put it to use, you made it meaningful in a holistic way, realizing that you're carrying on his legacy through your work and letting his spirit live on. Because so many, like my community mother always has told, Pamela Hubbard is my community mother. And she always she taught us, as long as you got somebody still here to call your name as ancestor veneration. So that was beautiful that you said that. But then also that moment you was having, just the beauty of the profundity of life and just the experience, to just realize like he's not in this realm, but he is in another. And I still can communicate and access his spirit and power.
Still do. That's the beauty of it too. Still connected.
And we this human experience is such an anomaly and a blessing and an honor, no matter what's going on, because we'll be transitioning too.
Yes.
That's one thing we know for sure. So thank you for sharing that beautiful moment.
All right. I'm speaking with Aja Barrett right here on Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM WOVU, Cleveland's Urban Alternative. We'll be right back after this.
WOVU 95.9 thrives daily to provide a positive forum for discussion of community issues and opportunities. Provide a creative platform for every segment of our community. Produce and distribute entertaining and uplifting cultural, educational, and artistic programming. Produce and distribute local community news, information, and public service announcements. Provide a platform for the live coverage of local community and school sports. Provide a portal for outsiders to rediscover the Forgotten Triangle and its potential. Provide media education and training to participating members of the community. Make no mistake, WOVU 95.9, Our Voices United, a solution-driven radio station. Attention listeners, WOVU 95.9 FM, Our Voices United is now streaming on iHeartRadio. We are the same community radio station with the same mission, now with another way to bring you the content you need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can still find us on WOVU.org and still listen to us anywhere on the free WOVU mobile app. Those are not going away, but you can also find us on iHeart.com and on the free iHeartRadio mobile app. However you choose to listen, keep it locked for the latest content as we continue to provide a platform for you, the best audience in the land, right here on WOVU 95.9 FM, Our Voices United, a Burton Bell Carr community radio station.
WOVU 95.9 FM, Cleveland's urban alternative.
Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson and my conversation with Aja Barrett, also known as Queen's Reign. And we've been having an interesting conversation about the significance of staying connected to our ancestors, because I'm one of those folks who honestly and fervently believes that we are them. They are us, and we exist for them to do their work. So that's what we got to do. That's what we got to do.
And before we hop to our next topic, the early days of the Sister Circle, like I say, 20 plus years ago, people know me and the circle as Queen's Reign. I have then since came into a lot of people in the hip hop community know me as Spiral. I was lovingly giving that moniker because of the way that I think. You know, I was told that we'll start one place and either my train of thought will spiral us up or spiral us down, but we have to always find our way back to where we started. Like people always say, you know, the way that I conversate and think and ask questions is like a spiral. So I was lovingly given that name.
Oh, spiral. Okay. The symbol of evolution. And the fact that there is no such thing as a straight line. In nature, there's no such thing as a straight line. When you look at sacred geometry and other things, you'll find the significance of that spiral. So,
come on now.
Yes,
yes, I see the spiral everywhere, the Fibonacci, the golden spiral, and it's in so many things, and it's so beautiful. Like when I happen to, like, it seems like I always happen to see it or notice it, and it always just it snatches me. It's so enchanting. Like if you look at the way that a rose even unfolds, I realized one winter day that snow spirals down. If it's coming down softly enough, it spirals down. Like the spiral of the water cycle, the spiral of the snail, the spiral of the eardrum, like it's all over, you know. So I did put that on there as well too.
Yes.
And then the universe itself, you know.
Yeah. And what comes out of your body when you go to the bathroom, the liquid portion, that's a spiral too. And I think
everything's spiral.
Everything's spiral. You have uncovered some depth today, and you mentioned Fibonacci. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole right now, but you know, once again, things that we should know about that we don't know about. So yes. So I'm remembering once upon a time you were part of something that a person that I call my art partner, and she calls me her art partner, and art is in the middle of her last name. It's Garth, Gwen Garth.
Yes.
You were doing poetry at the Art Palace when it was on Kinsman, and it was in the space that right now is occupied by WOVU and Burton Bell Carr Community Radio.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Talk about your presence on the local scene as a poet and organizer of poetry events.
I'll just go ahead and start there. That was not my first. Well, I started hosting open mics for poetry and hip hop probably 20 plus years ago as well. I'm a West Sider. Excuse me. I'm a West Sider, so much of my early hosting and work was on the West Side of Cleveland, all throughout little lounges, little clubs, like community centers, because I grew up in the housing projects in Cleveland, so we did a lot of stuff there growing up there. So those are like the early beginnings. So I've been doing hosting and writing forever, like you said in the intro. Since a child, I've been writing and doing poetry and stuff like that. So anyway, Gwen Spot, which was such a lovely experience, like I had so much fun there. And the name of that poetry circle we did was 360 Degrees of Free. And it was intended to be an open mic for hip hop artists. You could sing, mainly poetry was what we were wanting to do. And it ended up evolving over a few months to like this healing circle. And I value that time that we spent at Gwen's Spot doing poetry and art, because that was when I first started kind of embracing that spoken word and music, and hip hop was asking for that healing component to be attached to it. So many things that people were talking about through their art, it always went back to, what I went through, how I grew up, what I'm aiming for. Like, it just had a spiritual component to me. So we started adding like healing pieces to that. And ever since then, I always have that as part of any open mic or any kind of writing thing that I do, that healing component, so we can do the both together, create art and do the healing. Such a long story, but such a long experience. And then most recently, I'll be wrapping up. Actually, tomorrow is my last session. I did a partnership with University Circle, Inc. and did a writing club called Sacred Tapestries. And which was spiritual to me, because the way that the workshop is set up, Vince, is that everyone who is there gets to choose their own topic. Like, let's say I want to write about peace in the Black community, right? That's my topic. So I'll write my first line, and everybody, we circulate through the room, and everybody adds a line onto your topic and the poem that you're writing. And then at the end of the group, we read out what we have. So that's why I wanted to call it Sacred Tapestries, because each voice has added on to the topic that was important to you. And that was such a communal and spiritual piece to me. So that's the most recent writing community offering that I'm wrapping up now.
You just gave me an idea.
What was that? What idea?
Well, I've taught classes as well, and I've always been looking for ideas of exercises to do with folks who are in a creative writing process. And that sounds like a perfect thing. And I've probably done versions of that before, but to have a theme like the one that you just expressed and then have folks write on that issue, it seems that you could come up with some really interesting pieces as a result of doing that.
You really can. And if you decide to adopt the idea, invite me out. Let me be a part of it, because this is, I did this first with a group of high schoolers I had been working with. I had a hip hop and poetry club at a school that I was working at. And so I was working with these students for 3 years. And, high schoolers, they're evolving, they're growing, they're changing. So from the time of being a freshman to being a junior, they all, were growing up, wasn't particularly feeling each other no more, just changing as they grew. And we were having some issues with the group, and they all were so special, all so very good. And I said, I can't let this group break up. So I actually came up with that just as an activity to kind of bring them back together, to remind each other we're all good. So they can be like, oh, she is hard. Oh, he is good. I miss writing with him. I miss writing with her. And it did work to bring them back together, to keep the group going. for the rest of that school year. But when I saw the effect of it, I said, this is something that I want to try in the community. So that's how Sacred Tapestries was born.
Well, to that point, I think it's really important for young people who are going through an educational process to have access to those kinds of activities. And these are the kinds of things that they push back on. Art is usually the first thing to be eliminated when they cut budgets. But then when you look at the value of the activity and you look at the value that that comes out in their lives, it's something that, if you ask me, it should be mandatory. You should have some type of artistic situation. When was it, and you said that you were writing as a child, when was it that the light bulb went on in your head that, hey, if I write this, it's going to make me feel better?
To be honest, like many young girls, I kept a diary at a very young age. Like I started keeping a diary probably at 8, 9, 10, like grade school. Like I started keeping a diary early. To be transparent, I had a very challenging upbringing. I came up in the 80s and 90s. So this is the crack era, right? In the projects on the west side of Cleveland. So the whole community was under distress. The whole community was struggling. Almost every single family in the neighborhood I grew up in, was missing a father, mothers, alcohol, drug addicted, the older men in the community that you needed and wanted to look up to. Many of them were being incarcerated or killed. And the drugs just hit the Black community really hard. And I got to live that firsthand. So I had to, writing was an outlet for me for that, to kind of write through that. And to be honest with you, it was one of the things that saved my life, right along with music. So I just kept a diary for years. And then a lot of it started becoming poetry. And I'm like, wow, this is, so it kind of just evolved from self-catharsis to art.
I'm curious about the point at which it stopped being complete self-catharsis and it became artistic.
To be honest with you, I don't know if it ever has. I don't know if I'll be able to do a poem while we're on here. But this last poem that I just wrote, it made me think of it, that question that you just asked. But I'm not sure that it has stopped doing that, but I think the way in which my relationship to my writing has evolved through time. So I realized at one point, it wasn't just me writing for healing and to unload all of these heavy things off my heart and my spirit. When I first decided to share, for years, it was just like I was reading out of my diary. Like I thought it was poetry, but it was clearly being received. Like, this girl is reading her diary entries to us. This is heavy. This is not art. I could tell it was being received in a certain kind of way, but I stayed true to that. I didn't care. It was poetry to me. It was saving my life. I wanted to share it. That's what I was doing. So then the hip hop started coming in. So it gave it almost a protective barrier of the heavy things I was expressing and writing about and sharing. The hip hop kind of was like, yeah, but protect that though. And so many of your people are experiencing this. You're not by yourself. And why is this happening? And what can you do? So the hip hop kind of gave me a different approach, and it healed a lot of that, to realize you don't have to cry and break down and down the inside by yourself, waxing poetic to all this pain and trauma that's going on in these communities. You can speak up about this, stand up, get with the other people, make your voice heard that this is not okay. Make your voice heard that you are hurting and you're not laying down about it. So just my approach to the way of expression has evolved, but I'm still very much cathartic through my art.
Okay. Well, I'm going to say a little bit about that when we get back, because I've had quite an extensive experience with catharsis, poetry, and open mic. So we'll talk about that when we get back. This is Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM WOVU, Cleveland's urban alternative. We'll be back in a moment.
Attention listeners, WOVU 95.9 FM, Our Voices United, is now streaming on iHeartRadio. We are the same community radio station with the same mission. Now with another way to bring you the content you need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can still find us on WOVU.org and still listen to us anywhere on the free WOVU mobile app. Those are not going away, but you can also find us on iHeart.com and on the free iHeartRadio mobile app. However you choose to listen, keep it locked for the latest content as we continue to provide a platform for you, the best audience in the land, right here on WOVU 95.9 FM. Our Voices United, a Burton Bell Carr community radio station.
At CMSD, we believe in creating access to services, programs, and opportunities. Every day, we strive to provide innovative learning experiences where passions lead to career paths. From trade education to early college courses, the possibilities are profound, empowering every scholar to discover their path and achieve their dreams. The future of CMSD starts here.
This message has been brought to you by Cleveland Metropolitan School District and WOVU 95.9 FM. Our Voices United, Burton Bell Carr Community.
Finally, a station that represents you, the people. 95.9 FM, WOVU, Cleveland's urban alternative.
Represents a good feeling, good vibes, positivity.
Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson. This fascinating conversation with Queen's Reign, also known as Spiral, also known by the government name, Aja Barrett. The reflection that I wanted to make about the I call them journal entries, because back in the day I was going to open mic poetry, going to slams, went to nationals in 03 and 04. And it was like, wow, people were writing about such serious things and had been through so much, and some really didn't take the time to give it an artistic angle. It was like they were just sharing with you the details about their lost love or somebody that mistreated them or being sexually abused and all those other kinds of things. And I get it. It's necessary to express those things just because you need to get them off your chest. And, sometimes to have someone hear you, it kind of validates your struggle, and it does make you feel better. And I think the other thing too, and we kind of talked about this in a previous segment, but the value of artistic expression when it comes to healing, that's what art does. Music heals people. You listen to that song, after you hear the song, it makes you feel better. You listen to that poem, you relate to it, it connects to your heart, you feel better. That the role that we play in our society as artists is as healers. And I've been saying this and I will continue to say it. One of the solutions to this idea of racism as a public health crisis is art.
Yes.
Absolutely art. Now, you asked if you might be able to share a poem, and we have 57 minutes for this program. And within the 57 minutes, there is room for you to do a poem. So if you have something on your heart you want to share, you have an open door.
Oh, wow. The poem is 3.5 minutes long.
Okay.
So do you want to put it right at the end, like in the last 4 minutes, last 5 minutes?
No, let's go for it.
Okay. So the poem is called Cry Baby, and this is one of my newer pieces. I've only spoken it at an open mic twice so far, so this is a new piece, and it speaks to what we talked about using the art to heal, and how I was saying that I still think that I'm self-cathartic through my art. But I'll say this before I say the poem. Both times I've performed it, it is really resonating with the women. And I'm already planning to bring Queen's Reign, which the name has changed to Jubilee, but to bring the sister circle back in the fall, because it continues to evolve as the women evolve, you know, and our needs and things like that. But anyhow, this poem has been really resonating with women. So it's called Crybaby. They say the baby came from the mother's womb and didn't make a sound. Smacked on the ass and dangled by an ankle. Ain't that what they used to do? Blinded by fluorescent lights already tied. This baby been here before, and it's probably right, because where does choice truly lie? Angry voices ripple through amniotic fluid. Why is she always crying? Broken eggshells, tippy-toe everywhere she go. Why is she always scared? Failing to understand the tyranny of hands at the ends of arms disconnected from the one she used to know. Why are we always hurting? The quiet dark of sadness eclipsed the light of her hope. She about to have to do this alone. No wonder she weeps. Waters drain and leak. Her body begins to squeeze. New life is coming. First, the head, and then defeat. A sacred, precious moment. Can't they see? To which the ancestors said, make a joyful noise. So she screamed and pushed and screamed and pushed and screamed and clenched and pushed and spread and yelled and pushed until everything in her went into the infant right before they cut the cord, but the baby never made a sound, just looked around. And as the cord shriveled and dried, the baby stored reservoirs of tears that would eventually be cried from the depths of a bassinet looking up into hollow eyes. Why won't she pick me up? There was something so cold in the warm room, baby longing to be held to her bosom. But there was no room. Mama could only hold herself, her tries caught in the fog of sorrow called postpartum. Cooing, crying, baby noises trying, hold me, hungry, sleepy, see me. The cord continued to shrivel. Silence, wailing, confusion, despair. From where will the comfort come? Days and nights, nights and days. The distance grows ever great, and like God's creatures tend to do, the baby grew and adapted, learned to need less and slowly fade, to be real still and not make no waves, to not be another reason to bring dampened leaves to her eyes and shadows to her face. Sharp edges to her shoulders, obligation to her embrace. Learn to stay out that lady way and catch love from a distance is safe to take. The baby aged 5, 6, 7, 8. And now, at the drop of a dime, she cry all the time, and it come from every place. Baby. Smiled a bright beam that cast a shadow on the wall of something that was more important. The smile began to burn, and the shadow welded the wall until an edifice erected still. The baby never felt protected. Baby. Bright possibility crashed into the abyss of invisibility, and both hearts swelled with water. Tears cried, cleansed hands, melt into pillows, and drip drop into the dishwater. Intimacy, an insurmountable need, knees tremble indeed. There was something so cold. Days and nights, nights and days, the baby continued to age. 16, 21, 35, 43 with hypersensitivity. But remember, the baby never made a sound, just looked around. So now the inner child is making all the noise. Now the inner child has encapsulated the voice. Who among us need to be held to the bosom? Who among us has known the hollow eyes? Who among us has learned to silence their cries? Follow the cord back to the source and cry, baby, cry, and make up for lost time.
Wow. Powerful words. And I was just thinking about that brother that still has that aspect of himself buried and needs to have that moment to bury his head in that bosom and have those tears, have that healing moment, and then get back to his chest out and his head held high.
Yes, all of us.
Yeah, everyone is universal. You know, I was also thinking about a part of our conversation earlier, you know, when you talk about having a conversation with your boys And sometimes your boys might not be as receptive as you think they could be. But then the reality of it is that we have masculine and feminine traits, all of us do. It's really about having balance. And so I have a friend, I remember one time we were at a situation and there was someone in our presence who, you know, perhaps has psychic abilities or, you know, really intuitive or whatever. And she said to my male friend that he had good feminine energy. And he just happens to be my best friend. So, you know, we can have conversations and I can be vulnerable and I can talk to him about things that are bothering me, talk about relationships and all of that and not feel judged. But I think it's, you know, maybe it's an exception. Maybe other brothers have this. But, you know, now that I think of it, a friend of mine, Nicole Miller, had a session. And I can't remember what the venue might have been. It might have been Unbar. But anyway, it was called Brother Talk. And she was moderating this conversation. And there were like 4 or 5 brothers on stage. And they were talking about these very kinds of things, which, you know, it just gives me that thought of how important it is for us to have those moments, to have those conversations, and for us to grow as humans and not be put in the boxes that we're put in and the labels that we deal with as being folks that are living on this planet. So
yes, because it truly limits the experience. And guess what? It's raining. It just started to rain.
Yeah. Everything happens for a reason. No such thing as coincidence, you know.
So beautiful. It literally just started raining.
Yep. And spring is springing. And
spring is sprung.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. So you've been doing this writing and I'm listening to your poetry, which I haven't heard for several years. So I just have to tell you how impressed I was with the story that you just told. And it just amplifies this notion that we as creatives, as writers, really have to seize the moment to change the narrative. Mm-hmm. How important do you think it is for us to do that?
I think it's at the top of the list of any kind of, I don't hear people saying revolution as much as we used to, but any transformational future that we can imagine, I think it's right at the top of things that we need to take back. That's one of the reasons why I'm getting into the Afrofuturism. And it kind of happened by accident because I'm always writing, when I'm writing stories and novels and plus I'm a big dreamer. Like I've been a huge dreamer my whole life. So I love to interpret dreams and my dreams are like movies. Like I have such a beautiful relationship to the dream world. So it has transferred over to my writing as I'm coming into short stories and longer like novelettes and novellas and all of that stuff now. But the Afrofuturism, Vince, I feel like is a beautiful, and I almost hate to label it because it's a beautiful opportunity to reimagine who we've been, who we are, and who we want to be. And we should be the ones saying that. You know, it's almost like we have to live our lives on the defensive. Like, oh, this is what the world said y'all went through. This is who the world said y'all is. So now we spend our entire existence like not being that. You know what I'm saying? Or trying to fight that. Or it's always a lens of this is what we're going through. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but I think that it's right in the top 3, reclaiming our narratives.
Okay. I'm telling you, time is flying. We're already at the end of segment number 3, and we're about to switch gears and go into segment 4, and we will do that when we return. This is 95.9 FM, WOVU, Cleveland's Urban Alternative. I'm speaking with Aja Barrett. We'll be right back.
WOVU 95.9 thrives daily to provide a positive forum for discussion of community issues and opportunities. Provide a creative platform for every segment of our community. Produce and distribute entertaining and uplifting cultural, educational, and artistic programming. Produce and distribute local community news, information, and public service announcements. Provide a platform for the live coverage of local community and school sports. Provide a portal for outsiders to rediscover the forgotten triangle and its potential. Provide media education and training to participating members of the community. Make no mistake, WOVU 95.9, Our Voices United, a solution-driven radio station. Attention listeners, WOVU 95.9 FM, Our Voices United is now streaming on iHeartRadio. We are the same community radio station with the same mission, now with another way to bring you the content you need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can still find us on WOVU.org and still listen to us anywhere on the free WOVU mobile app. Those are not going away, but you can also find us on iHeart.com and on the free iHeartRadio mobile app. However you choose to listen, keep it locked for the latest content as we continue to provide a platform for you, the best audience in the land, right here on WOVU 95.9 FM, Our Voices United, a Burton Bell Carr community radio station.
WOVU 95.9 FM, Cleveland's urban alternative.
Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson and my conversation with Aja Barrett. We were talking about the importance of the narrative. You put it way up at the top of the list when it comes to what we should be doing as creatives. And I tell you, I really couldn't agree more. You know, one of my pet peeves is that we keep returning to victim status. I think one of the latest examples of that is the film Sinners, and I haven't seen it, and honestly, I'm not really planning to see it, although I do know that it is a fantastic film, great work of art, conveys a story of how music evolved from what we did and all of that, things that we already know. But I just look at this history of cinema and how we just keep coming back to being a victim. I'm recalling the film American Fiction. Did you see it?
No, and I haven't seen Sinners either.
Okay. American Fiction is a different kind of film with a different kind of message, and it's a film about a writer. It's actually a film about writers. So for that reason, I think you'll enjoy it. I'm not going to spoil it for you because you haven't seen it, but I think that the narrative, the story that was told was extremely well written. And you get to the end of that movie and you see that they had a chance to control the outcome. You telling the story, and you can tell it in a way that either lifts you up or puts you down. And that's all I will say about that. The ball was dropped on that film. And I'm sure that there was a point that was trying to be made. But I'm like, bruh, you know, you had the magic wand.
That's a heavy burden as a writer. I'll say that. Like even as I'm writing these stories, because I do have some short stories already written. I got one story, Vince, that I'm working on, and it is about like 4 generations of a family, and it centers the women of the family. And the story starts like maybe like during the Middle Passage or right after, and it goes up until right after the Civil Rights Movement. But the thing about it is that these women are indigenous to the Americas. So it's from their perspective on these lands that were there. Look, I won't give away the whole story, but as I'm writing it, right, I'm realizing like, okay, there's this historical piece. It's the narrative piece about just Black women and families and the Middle Passage and who's indigenous and all these different things. And sometimes, you know, you get to sweat. You have to mop your brow and bite your nails. Like, how do I want to say that this happened to them? Sometimes I find that to be a daunting moment, like what story you want to tell versus what story needs to be told.
I think the important thing is to tell the truth. That's the real issue with narratives, because a lot of these narratives, you know, they're based on lies. You know, it's just like what you brought up about indigenous women. And that's something that many of us don't know because we follow the narrative that we are all descendants of people who were brought over on ships. Mm-hmm. And that's not true. because we were here before the ships came. And if you follow the narrative that they're giving you, they want to push you away from any kind of notion that you have claim to this land that they don't.
Yes.
So again, the power of the narrative, and the stories will not be told properly until we tell them. And while we have this conversation, they're doing everything they can to erase us from history, to erase our presence from the memory banks of folks all around the world. They're going through extreme measures to do that. And so, again, that heightens the need for us to tell our stories and get them out. So Ryan Coogler, he did an amazing thing. If you look at the records that have been broken and all the money that's being made from this film, and again, no disrespect, because the story that's being told is told in a way that shows the injustices that happened in the history of this country. But what I'm saying is, some of us know what happened. Some of us need to know what happened. When you look at the history of Black people in this country and the ways that we were treated, the things that were being done to us, it's just humanity. It was somebody whose name I won't mention, but I will just express what he said. Everybody else who came to this country came as immigrants. We came to this country as product. We came to this country as inventory. Our story is different from everybody else's. And that's another reason why we need.
I think I know who said that. Why won't you say his name?
Well,
If you know, you know.
We'll just say he's from Philadelphia, and we'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Okay. And I've had conversations with this person in the past. Wow. We've done a few different interviews, and we've talked about things. But sometimes names can be polarizing to folk, and so when you mention a name, then they want to discredit everything that was said by that person. When that person says a lot of things that people need to know, and you can question his motives, you can question his behavior, but you can't question the accuracy of history that is being expressed to that person and the lessons that we need to learn from that history.
Especially that early work.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And, something else I think that is worth mentioning right now, and that is the importance of us understanding that our history goes beyond 400 years.
Come on. I tire of that narrative so bad. I was tired of that as a teenager. I remember when I was coming through school, they used to make us watch Roots. Mm-hmm. And I could never sit there and I just couldn't sit there and watch it. It felt like a whole nother level of torture. And I'm like, this is it? I'm sure what was we doing before this?
Well,
it was just so traumatizing to me. And it was a bit we're talking about this narrative now, Vince. Mm-hmm. Big reason why I was a homeschooler. I didn't get to homeschool every single year, but I homeschooled every year that I could. And I had to work hard to do it, but I did it. No, you know what I'm saying? It's a lot of things that we need to take back in addition to the narrative. And it's, our children's mind is one of them. It's another reason why I like working with young people.
Yes. Well, the fact is, and again, this is something that was expressed by that person, and I'm happy to repeat it. When we came to this country, we didn't come to this country as slaves. That's a label that was placed upon us. We were doctors. We were farmers. We were engineers. We were priests. We were all kinds of things, but we were reduced to slave. We had our culture stripped from us. We had our language stripped from us. They would cut off our fingers and our hands if we were caught with a book in our hand. And then they gave us a Bible, and the Bible reinforced the notion that us being in that position was in divine order. So
just insanity. And this is it's making me think back again about the emotional wellness. And people say generational trauma. I really don't like to use that word. I like to say generational pattern. Can you imagine the ancestral pain that we carry from that? When you just think of it, the killing, the burning, the murdering, the stabbing, the dragging, the drownings, like just all of the stuff that happened to people, to our ancestors. And have we truly recovered? And on what levels have we? Yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, but that's why I feel like our narratives, our emotional and spiritual wellness is important. And we can do so much of that through art.
Yes. Well, part of the conversation about the emotional trauma is that it's epigenetic, meaning that it's in our genes and it's passed down from generation to generation. So, and we talked earlier about the fact that we are our ancestors. So everything that they went through lives in us. But it doesn't mean that we can't recover from it. And I think what has to happen in many situations is that we have to go through a process to recognize what happened and then have a strategy or a plan to do what we need to do to heal from it, which brings us back to the value of art. And it brings us back to the importance of the narrative. You can tell the story in a way that makes you feel triumphant, or you can tell the story in a way that returns you to that victimhood status and feeling bad about yourself and everything that everybody's ever done to you. And, you know, how you ever going to get up from that? Well, you know, we can use our imaginations, which is what we do as writers, to create new realities. So just shifting gears, you mentioned writing short stories and novels. Talk to us about your foray into beyond the poem.
To be honest, I think it was just living that made the scope of the writing need to be, I don't want to say bigger, because poetry is everything to me, but it needed to expand into a broader medium so that I could cover more. And I say that that's from living because, like I was saying earlier, when I was a young girl writing in my diary, a young woman in my early 20s, reading my poems and my journal entries, like you said, and reading from my diary and calling it poetry, and just the evolution of it. Like, the more that I've lived, because the same way that I write is the way that I live. Like, I live very courageously when it comes to spirit and emotion. I'm very intentional about that. So when you live like that, and I think that's part of the magic of being Black and being a Black woman, because living like that, I feel like I done lived 5 different lifetimes in one, Vince. Like, my heart and my spirit has led me to so many different experiences and places and people. And I see all of that as the ancestors' gift to me. Like, I'm giving you these people, I'm letting you borrow these people to love. I'm giving you these friends so you can learn. I'm sending you to these organizations and these collaborations so that you can build and grow and continue to do the work. Like, I see every choice that we make as an opportunity of that. So that's my narrative for my life, you know. So everything I experience, I'm filtering it through that spiritual lens, that emotional and ancestral lens. So the way, as an artist and a writer and a creative, the way in which I'm expressing and understanding my life has evolved. So I needed to write a longer story that had more breadth, and I could flesh out characters better and more now because I understand the scope of living more. Like, just living authentically made me feel able to write a novel.
Well, I'm going to look forward to reading your novel when it's published. Make sure that I get a copy of it, and then I can live vicariously through your vision. It has been an extreme pleasure to have this conversation with you. Before we go, is there any social media content that you want us to connect to if folks want to reach out to you?
Thank you so much. I do want to share, I have a brand new Instagram that I just started when we started the Sacred Tapestries workshop. So it's a very new page. When you go to the page, you're only going to see one post, but I do want people to follow the page, because every community or creative offering that I'll be building out and sharing is going to be shared on that page. So the Instagram page is Sacred Tapestries, spelled just like it sounds, SacredTapestries, Sacred Tapestries on Instagram. So people can follow and just hang out and look out for updates and offerings.
All right. There you have it. Aja Barrett right here on Open Door with Vince Robinson. As always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, and make today your absolute best day. Peace.